We're going to be addressing the reasons behind recent terrorist acts, our thoughts and prayers are with those affected by such violence.
Hello, and welcome to the show. This is the show dedicated to religion, politics, and business. Now, this week, Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark will debate terrorism. Now is the time to act. As we have all seen, yet again, a terrorist attack has hit mainland Europe. And in this particular case, we have seen two incidents, one in Spain and one in Finland. The atrocities seem to be continuing. Why is this? What do we need to do? How many more incidents will occur before serious action needs to be taken? What does need to be done, clearly, is something perhaps a little bit more decisive. With me today is Clergyman Pete. So, Clergyman Pete, another terrorist attack. Sadly, and we will talk about this, yet more victims. What needs to be done?
Well, the thing about these terrorist attacks is that they are all, in fact, all over recent years, except very few exceptions, but all recently have been carried out by people who are Muslims and are reacting to a certain interpretation of Islam. And the thing to do is to recognise that Muslim majority countries have been targeted by bombing campaigns, by wars by Western powers, including Britain. And then when we invite them over here, perhaps as people from those countries or those areas, they come here and there aren't really enough jobs for them. There's some Islamophobia, people reacting against them. And so it's understandable that they are radicalized because they're not having the right sort of help and support that they need. If only we could cope with the problem of global warming, which is causing them to. No, all this is in fact, of course, nonsense. What I'm trying to do is give a run through of the sort of excuses, the sort of reason which seems to come from a lot of the mainstream media, and certainly quite a few of our politicians, to excuse this sort of behaviour, to put the burden on those who point out the obvious truth that there is a problem with the Islamic religion, which is breeding terrorists who are then coming out into Western countries. What we then do about it needs to involve looking seriously at how we address the ideology which is causing this sort of atrocity.
Well, I have a particular view on this. I'm probably in a slightly different position to most people because I have actually lived in an Islamic country, and that's in the Middle East, in particular Saudi Arabia. And what I would say here, and what disappoints me and what's unfolded over the last few years, is I know personally that Islam is as it professes, is a religion of peace. And there's no doubt about that. The values that the religion professes, particularly when it comes to things like family values, as well as being dedicated to your faith. And what disappoints me in particular is what certainly has happened in recent times, certainly over the last 5 to 10 years, is that you're right. One of the things that I think has come to light is that we seem to have seen a problem where integration hasn't worked. Through incidents in Syria and many other places that we've seen where war has occurred, perhaps those Western states, such as Germany, Spain, Italy, parts of Northern Europe, including the United Kingdom, have opened their doors, and unfortunately politicians haven't taken on board the challenges that would have brought. What we're seeing now is that there are vulnerable people who have perhaps not recognized and understood what the Western civilization is all about. And the reason I say that, having seen it myself, is I do know that you do tend to get a distorted view of any region once you have absorbed yourself in a particular culture. I'm going to say this from my personal experience, having lived outside of the United Kingdom or Europe for 5 years. Looking back at Europe, it's quite interesting where you start to sort of see things in a totally different perspective. You may not always necessarily agree with some of the culture. And what I'm specifically referring to is things that doesn't always sit very well with Islam. So, for example, the way that women are perhaps uncovered in their dress sense. Yeah, I'm all for things like being fashionable uh, and at the same time having freedom of speech. But I do see that there are some situations which aggravate both parties. And I definitely believe that one of the things that's happened here is that things have happened too quickly and there hasn't been a sustainable strategy. Germany faces it quite seriously, where they've had over 1 million Muslims enter the country, and unfortunately, as a result, now the problem is that we've got pockets of groups that haven't quite integrated with society, not just on language, but in terms of the culture. Now, I understand that there are some politicians who have been heavily criticised for pointing out some of the issues with people like Angela Merkel, who they've openly criticised her, for example, for not having a strategy, or at least certainly not having a robust strategy.
Yeah.
I think they're right in some. There's definitely right in some places. I don't disagree with Angela Merkel's view to open up the doors to help people in need. It was an incredible gesture, a humanitarian gesture, to open those doors. The problem has been is that what it has now done is it's left people who are vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think you said at the beginning of your rhetoric, your comment, which is that there are too many people now who have become isolated from those communities in which they now find themselves. And sadly, for whatever political reasons or religious reasons, certain groups now have focused on them to basically manipulate them and radicalize them. Now, the issue is, what do we now do to stop it? This isn't a case, in my opinion. This is just, again, I'm just going to say my personal opinion. I don't think this is necessarily a case of Christians, Muslims, or Hindus, Sikhs, or any other religion that you care to mention. What it is now, where we are, and this is about, now is the time to act. I think this is a point about isolating certain groups that are either vulnerable who we know to be vulnerable or potentially a threat. Because what we can't do is we continue to allow this freedom of movement, and more importantly, if we do not have a much more sustainable policy in place to integrate people better into society, these issues are only going to continue to occur. And the last thing I will say is, we know definitely that governments are doing a lot in terms of putting more resources into police work, etc. Yes, I think that can help, but it's definitely not enough. I think what I would say is there has to be some form of lockdown in terms of stopping the movement of people, starting to address the problem in a much more sustainable way, and crucially having a much more stricter policy on containing, perhaps imprisoning people who we know and the police know are actually a threat, a potential threat. Now, we've seen, just to prove the point, that when there has been incidents either in the UK or in many other places, the police have openly come out and said, yes, we've recognised them, we've been monitoring them for some time travelling across Europe. Well, we suddenly think to ourselves, why didn't they do something about it? And my belief now is that it isn't a case of victimizing a particular religion. I think it's basically trying to stop terrorists.
Yes.
And there's a big difference.
Yeah, there is, yes. And the thing is, when it comes to a particular religion, whichever religion you take, the word religion sort of limits, actually, the effects. Is Christianity a religion? Well, Christianity has been behind the development of Western culture, you could say. In a way, it's all Christian. And with Islam, that's maybe even more the case. It's a whole worldview, a whole culture, a whole way of behaving. However, the foundation of it is important. Just to show you how that would change. Imagine if in the Bible it didn't say when Jesus asked was asked what should we do when he was being confronted by by people coming to take him away, and they drew out a sword and cut off someone's ear. If Jesus, instead of saying put the sword away, he would say, "Go on, kill them all, because they're unbelievers." Or how many times should I forgive? Forgive, don't bother forgiving. Kill them with the sword, smite them. If Jesus had said those sort of things, it would change the sort of religion that it was. You will still get violent people who are Christian
Yes.
and who say they're killing people in the name of Christ. But if you go back to the fundamentals of the Christian, you won't. And the overall tenor of the religion of Christianity is to draw people back to being peaceful. In fact, to be giving up their life for the people, to make sacrifices. Now, with Islam, which is a unifying force, has put a lot of importance on the family, as you were pointing out, and within Islam can promote peace and has been Muslim culture has been an extremely sophisticated culture. Some of the best mathematicians, looking back, the best mathematicians
Yep.
developing mathematics, taking it forward, taking philosophy forward, certainly theistic theology, have been Muslims. So it's a great religion in that case. Not yes, peace within its own culture, but also developing thought and moving thought on for humanity. But it has this problem that it was started by a murderous warlord named Muhammad. And his beliefs, of course, put the tone to it. And it's horrific because he is held up, Muhammad is held up as someone to follow, as Jesus was. And if you follow what Muhammad did, you're going to end up doing some very unpleasant things, much like the terror attacks that we've seen. He used terrorist attacks to take over. Jesus went around persuading people, performing miracles, persuading people to love each other. Muhammad went around persuading people to submit to Allah and to him personally, in practice, and to kill those who didn't believe. An example in the Quran, Surah 9, verse 123. O you who believe, fight those of the unbelievers who are near you, and let them find in you hardness. Now, this is is a later part of the Quran, so it supersedes earlier, more peaceful comments. This is the sort of thought from the Quran that people who commit terror are obeying. So, a fundamentalist Muslim is going to be a terrorist. A fundamentalist Christian, or from other religions, are often not violent because the fundamentals of the religion are different. Now, that's not to say, of course, that all Muslims are violent. Of course, they're not, and it's not to say that that Islam cannot be reformed. It can. It needs to go through a reformation in which these violent parts are removed, or at least taken only spiritually. You could take jihad, holy war. People, liberal Muslims, say, "Oh, we should take that just for our internal struggle, and not go and fight people." But if you take it literally, and you're a fundamentalist and want to act out what the founder said, then you're going to end up with violence. And these things are not addressed. Why? Well, people are afraid to talk about it. And if we can't talk about it, if we can't create a situation in which it's okay to criticize Islam, you're going to end up with this thing not only happening again and again, having more, it being increasing, and because the fundamentalists in Islam want to take over the country. And they actually, in parts of Europe, they're doing pretty well. They're doing pretty well at taking things
Well,
over.
I mean, again, indeed. I mean, I'm going to come at it from a different perspective, which is from my own personal experience again. Which is, look, I mean, I'm going to say that my experience in the Middle East was extremely valuable, and I enjoyed working there. And what disappoints me, and I know it disappoints those people from certainly the Islamic countries, those Muslim countries, and the people that are there, they are distraught at what's happening. There's no doubt about that. And I feel disappointed for them, I have to say, because I know that if you look at what's going on in the media, certain quarters are trying to sort of defend what's happening, and they do recognise that it's not everyone that has the same views as Islamic State. This is a faction that's come out in recent times that sadly has. We can go back to the origins of it, but unfortunately now we have this evil force that's basically now set on destroying society, established society. And I would say, though, that I do agree with your point that one of the biggest challenges that I certainly recognise is if you cannot talk about the issues, even though some of them are very painful, you're never going to get to an understanding. So that's the first point. And more importantly, you're not going to get to a solution here. Because what I do understand is when you actually talk to people from the West and you ask them, tell me what you think about Islam, I actually do think that quite a lot, and particularly the vast majority, don't quite get it. Similarly, the other way around, if you ask somebody from a Muslim state about Western Europe, they have some quite stereotypical views and doesn't necessarily reflect what's going on. So therefore, I do agree that I think one of the solutions here is to try and ensure that the stakeholders, and it's not just governments, incidentally, it's members of the community. So, for example, it would be, in your case, it would be, for example, as a church leader, getting out into the communities and building more open dialogue. Similarly, again, with the imams, getting out into the community and inviting people to talk more about those issues. If we don't do that, then I can definitely see that the things will only get worse. And the reason is because what I find is quite extraordinary when you try and get to understand why people are doing certain things. They're doing it based upon false evidence, false views of either individuals, groups, possibly even an entire nation in some cases. It's quite extraordinary, the ignorance that seems to sit out there.
I think what many people would not realise, including many Muslims, would not realise is that, of course, the development of the Quran was an offshoot of, or a corruption of, Christianity and Judaism. So Islam has a lot of similarity, in fact, with Jewish religion and with Christians. There should be points of contact. In fact, there are. There's a similarity in the same way as, there's Jehovah's Witnesses, there's Mormons, there's later offshoots of Christianity. The Muslim religion was a sort of an early example of that. So there are points of similarity which you could make points of connection with, have conversation and dialogue, but that's not being done because of two pressures which we've highlighted here. One is the pressure to demonize all of Islam, and the pressure the other way is to just say how wonderful all of Islam is because of fear of criticizing. And the two different pressures don't result in proper dialogue in which the Quran can be criticized, Muhammad can be criticized, and other religions can be criticized. But it seems that Islam is given a free pass, which doesn't do it any favours, because you end up with resentment being stored up. And so what we have now is terrorism being carried out in the name of Islam. Well, we can show that it's not purely an Islamic problem, because if you went back a few years, there was terrorism back in, you go back to the 60s, there's terrorism. They were all communists. If you go back earlier, they're all anarchists. There seem to be different reasons for the terrorism. So it cannot be purely an Islamic problem. Although, as I say, it has a very convenient, in terms of people who want to commit violence, a very convenient basis. And there's was a fundamentally evil, selfish man who set it up in the first place and used it for his own ends. But that doesn't mean that we give up. I think we can make points of connection, and we can only do that, however, with strong action. And the time to know is to act. And we need to, as you say, if people, we know that they're going to commit terrorism, they can be stopped en route. We need to put a stop to immigration for a time. It needs to be a complete halt to mass immigration into Europe. It needs to stop so that we can allow people time to integrate, that we can throw out or other ways deal with the violent tendencies, to give us time to talk and to to give us time to cope with this problem. As long as there's wave after wave of Muslim immigrants coming in, there is no time to act. We need to stop immigration and put a pause on immigration.
Well, I think that that's a valid point, because I think the other side to this as well. I mean, whichever party you represent, whichever group you represent, and so on. I've also got to also point out the issue of the victims here. We've seen over the last few years that now, sadly, the numbers have been rising significantly, and it's interesting that we talk about the culprits, but we should not forget, of course, those innocent people. And it's interesting when I sort of look at some of the commentary that's out there, and it very much puts on a focus and a lens on those individuals. Now, when we turn to those who, of course, are no longer with us, we should remember that. And whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a Christian, or whether you're from any other walk of life, that this is key. And it's interesting, I just got a little observation here from someone just had a little thought, and this is about some of the issues that we're seeing in the neighborhoods and what is an undercurrent that seems to be happening. A little thought here called thorns. A happy place is in the garden of your soul, bearing all the fruits of your labor. But God forewarns a malevolent mole, and to always love thy neighbor. So when thorns cut skin and make it bleed, beneath the fragile English rose, the sap of civilization has gone to seed, to where the root of evil grows. So, in the fact that clearly there's an underlying trend, there are clearly problems there, and the problem will only continue until we address the issue immediately and take action. Readers and listeners, what do you think about this situation? What do you believe? Do you think that not only should governments take quick action, what about you in society? Or what do you think? Let us know. Why not drop us a line on www.markandpete.com, and we certainly want to hear your thoughts on this matter. Follow us at Mark and Pete on Twitter. This subject, unfortunately, will continue. Join us again next time for more colourful conversations with Mark and Pete.